Good morning, everybody, and the subcommittee will come to order. The chair recognizes himself for 5 minutes for an opening statement. My colleagues, the purpose of today's business meeting, is to authorize the issue of 2 subpoenas to the White House and to the Office of the Vice President for documents relating to the DOE loan guarantee to Solyndra Incorporated. This is only the second time this subcommittee has considered a resolution authorizing a subpoena in this Congress. Earlier this year, OMB repeatedly failed to cooperate with our investigation, and we agreed to put off a vote on that subpoena because we were assured that engaging in a dialogue with the administration and the minority would resolve all the problems without the need to resort to a subpoena. But that was just a stalling tactic, and we were forced to issue a subpoena several weeks later. Unfortunately, the same continued uncooperative conduct by the administration has necessitated today's vote. On September 1st, 2011, this committee requested documents from the White House counsel relating to the Solyndra loan guarantee. Specifically, the committee asked the White House to produce all documents containing communications relating to Solyndra between the White House and Solyndra, and between the White House and Solyndra's investors. 2 weeks later, the White House began to produce selected communications, which revealed that senior advisors in the West Wing were monitoring and discussing Solyndra. Based on these documents, we sent a second request to the White House counsel on October 5th for all internal communications that were relating to Solyndra. We requested that they engage in a dialogue with us about how best to manage the production of documents. Instead, the White House counsel's office waited until October 14th to respond, informing us in a letter that in the opinion of the White House, the committee didn't need to see such documents. On October 18th, the committee staff informed the counsel's office that it needed to invoke a valid privilege or produce the responsive documents. When asked again to contact committee staff in order to start a dialogue on this issue, the White House counsel office refused to engage in any discussion. 1 week later, on October 25th, the White House counsel sent another non-responsive letter to the committee, again refusing to produce the documents because, in the administration's opinion, the committee did not need to see such documents. Only after repeated failed attempts to engage the White House did the committee notify the White House and the administration that it intended to notice a business meeting to discuss the possible issuance of subpoenas to obtain the requested information. This finally got the attention of the White House counsel, and we met with her yesterday. Unfortunately, the White House was unable or unwilling to answer even the most basic questions. Do you have any responsive documents? Are you going to be asserting executive privilege? What quantity of documents do you have? Have you conducted an internal investigation to inform us as to what types of documents you have? Without the answers to these basic, simple questions, it is nearly impossible to narrow or limit the scope of our request. As the President himself has stated, quote, "The government should not keep information confidential merely because public officials might be embarrassed by disclosure, because errors and failures might be revealed, or because of speculative or abstract fears," end quote. My colleagues, I regret that we have reached this point. The committee has been investigating this for over 8 months and has clearly established the legitimacy of our investigation. 2 of the first 3 companies to receive loan guarantees have now filed for bankruptcy protection. And just yesterday, the DOE IG stated in his congressional testimony that the loan guarantee program has been badly mismanaged. He testified that the loan guarantee program could not, quote, "readily demonstrate how it resolved or mitigated relevant risks prior to granting loan guarantees," end quote. This is extremely troubling. We have a right to know who was involved and what decisions were made and why. At this point in time, I'm not confident that we will have a good faith response from the White House without issuing a subpoena. Now, the committee does not take this action lightly. Voting to authorize this subpoena is a necessary step in carrying out this committee's constitutional obligations. We simply cannot allow the executive branch at its highest level to pick and choose what they will produce or whether they will produce anything at all. Keeping documents confidential because public officials might be embarrassed by disclosure or, quote, because errors and failures might be revealed, unquote, is inexcusable. The American people demand more. We have a constitutional duty to pursue this important investigation of the DOE loan guarantee program to further our legitimate role in conducting oversight over how the executive branch has spent the taxpayers' money. The committee needs to better understand what the White House involvement was with regard to Solyndra's loan guarantee. My colleagues, if the White House has nothing to hide, they should simply cooperate with this investigation and quickly and readily produce the documents. I believe the President owes it to the American people to explain in detail what happened to their tax money. I now recognize my distinguished colleague from Colorado, Ms. DeGette, for 5 minutes in her opening statement.
Mr. Chairman, this is a sad day in the annals of this august subcommittee. In my 15 years on this subcommittee, we have forged a strong bipartisan tradition of thorough and meaningful investigations. That could have been the case with the Solyndra investigation. We have here a $525 million loan guarantee made with taxpayer funds that went bad. We need to learn the circumstances of the original deal as well as the refinancing. We need all the facts, all the witnesses, all the documents. Sadly, after seeing the majority's conduct of this investigation, I do not believe they share this goal. For example, in the last hearing that we had in this subcommittee, where there were emails by a Treasury employee suggesting the loan restructuring be sent to the Department of Justice, the majority only brought the Treasury Department in, never giving anyone the opportunity to find out why the DOE didn't get an opinion from Justice, and in fact resisting our efforts to put the legal opinion from Justice into the record. Now, I agree that White House documents should be produced, and in fact today the administration has provided this committee with over 800,000 pages of documents. 800 pages of documents, 80,000 pages of documents. The Departments of Energy and Treasury and the Office of Management and Budget have all produced documents on the matter, and they've all sent witnesses to testify before this committee. The White House has also already produced almost 1,000 pages of documents regarding communications with Solyndra and investors in the company. I believe that the majority's action in moving forward today with a subpoena resolution is an act of irresponsible partisanship. The committee has every right to seek and obtain relevant information from the White House to advance its legitimate oversight needs. But a subpoena to the White House is a serious step in a congressional investigation, and it's a step that should only be taken after alternative avenues have been exhausted. We clearly do not face those circumstances today. In contrast to subpoenas to executive branch agencies, a subpoena to the White House has the potential to reach communications all the way up to the President's desk. And that's why it's the long-standing practice of Congress and of this subcommittee to engage in meaningful discussions with the White House to attempt mutual accommodation when congressional oversight needs for White House information confront executive branch equities. In fact, I'm unaware of any subpoena to the White House ever from the Committee on Energy and Commerce under previous chairs, both Democrats and Republicans, and both when they did and did not share the same party affiliation with the administration. With respect to the subject of today's resolution to subpoena the White House, the starting point was the committee's October 5, 2011 request of the White House for documents relating to the Solyndra loan guarantee. In response to this request, the White House proposed the committee narrow its request to the following areas. 1, the influence of campaign contributions on the decision whether or not to grant or restructure the Solyndra loan guarantee. 2, involvement by the White House in the decision whether or not to make a conditional commitment to Solyndra for its loan guarantee. 3, involvement by the White House in the decision whether or not to close the Solyndra loan guarantee, and 4, involvement by the White House in the decision to subordinate the government's interests as part of the restructuring of the Solyndra loan guarantee. The White House never said that they wanted to keep documents private that embarrassed people. The White House never said that they didn't want to produce documents if they implicated certain donors. In fact, they offered to produce all of these categories of documents. Now, I knew that this investigation didn't really mean getting all of the evidence. When I received the majority's media advisory that they sent out late last night that said, despite committee leaders' bipartisan outreach to avoid subpoena, White House fails to turn over requested documents, and said on page 2, a quote from the Chairman Upton and Stearns, that the White House still refuses to turn over internal Solyndra-related communications, when in fact, I sat there in that meeting yesterday, Mr. Waxman sat there in that meeting yesterday, our staff sat there with the majority and the White House, and the White House repeatedly said that they had turned over documents and they were willing to turn over more documents. Mr. Chairman, last night, Mr. Waxman and I wrote a letter to you and to Mr. Stearns respectfully asking you to postpone the date of this subpoena issuance in an attempt to continue to work with the White House. I would ask unanimous consent to put a copy of that letter and a copy of the majority's media advisory into the record, and I would once again ask you, I would implore you to please postpone this hearing so that we can continue to work with the White House and avoid this unprecedented step of a subpoena.
Without objection, so ordered. Both documents will be part of the record, and we respectfully disagree with the ranking member. And the chair reminds members that pursuant to the committee's rules, all members' opening statements will be made part of the record. And I recognize the full committee chairman, the distinguished gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Upton.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do wish that it had not come to this. Oversight is a core congressional responsibility and one that has a proud tradition in this committee under both Republicans and Democrats. But sometimes in the course of an investigation, we find ourselves unable to secure necessary evidence. House rules expressly give us the power of subpoena to compel cooperation in these instances. It is a tool that we use sparingly and only as a last resort. Today is our last resort. We began reviewing the loan guarantee made to Solyndra by the federal government all the way back last February. Several news accounts had identified problems with the company, and industry experts had questioned whether Solyndra's business model was a sustainable one. Solyndra was not chosen at random. We had reason to believe that taxpayer dollars could be at risk, and we had a responsibility to look into the loan and understand how and why it was made. Unfortunately, we've had nothing but 8 months of frustration. There is a natural and appropriate tension between the legislative and executive branches of government. But what we've seen in the course of this investigation is downright obstruction. The administration has touted the tens of thousands of pages of documents, most of them highly technical, that it has turned over, never mentioning that producing those documents was like extracting a tooth without anesthesia. Unnecessarily painful, time-consuming as well. Just last night, the Department of Energy turned over several boxes of documents, proudly sharing them with the press long before delivering them to our investigators. But these documents are not responsive to the request that we're discussing today. They are long overdue responses to requests that we made weeks, even months ago. Many of the documents that the administration has produced were delivered only after being compelled by a subpoena to OMB. Then, as now, we repeatedly reached out to the administration to attempt to negotiate review and release of necessary documents. And then, as now, administration lawyers feigned a limited willingness to cooperate while steadfastly refusing to actually deliver the documents needed to get to the bottom of the whole Solyndra mess. We began this investigation 8.5 months ago, and the administration has put up roadblocks at virtually every turn. We were forced to contemplate a subpoena once before, and we did everything that we could to avoid that outcome. But after months of negotiations and broken agreements, we had no choice but to subpoena OMB's record, and unfortunately we had to issue that subpoena over the objection of every member of the minority. Unfortunately, we cannot get to the bottom of this mess without White House cooperation. Yet we're hearing the same excuses about the need for more time and vague promises to deliver something, but no details on some basic questions, like, what does the White House have, and when will they let us see it? Just yesterday, Chairman Stearns and I met with the White House counsel to try and broker an agreement. Ranking Member Waxman and Subcommittee Ranking Member DeGette joined us for that meeting. And what the White House offered was exactly the open-ended pledges that were given to us before the OMB subpoena. Almost 4 months after we served that subpoena, we still haven't received all the responsive documents from OMB. They're using the same tactics now, which means that we have no choice but to expect the same outcome and move forward with our subpoena accordingly. Last night, a little bit before 7, after the House had recessed, the House Counsel's Office contacted our investigators with a last-minute attempt to narrow the scope of our request. In exchange, the White House made no commitment to produce documents. However, their lawyers did express a willingness to conduct a search of their internal communications for only those items in the categories that they had identified. While it's encouraging, it's insufficient. This is the sort of negotiation that should occur after the initial request for documents, not on the eve of a subpoena. Any sign of cooperation is better late than never, and we fully intend to take last night's proposal into consideration as we refine the scope of the subpoena and work with the White House on its document production. With the Solyndra alone, we smelled a rat from the start, and the investigation proved that we were on the right track. We've clearly established that red flags were ignored, both with the initial loan guarantee and with its subsequent restructuring. We have clearly established that senior White House advisors had close knowledge of the Solyndra loan and that DOE officials felt pressure from the White House to approve the loan. We've made our case about the need for the documents. The White House has refused to produce them. We have no choice but to authorize the issuance of a subpoena to compel them. And I'll say it again, I wish it had not come to this, but it has. And I hope that members on both sides of the aisle will join me today to assert our authority and issue the subpoena. Yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen. I recognize the full committee ranking member for 5 minutes, the distinguished gentleman from California, Mr. Waxman.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with the statement that Representative DeGette, our ranking member, made. We should not be having this business meeting today. A congressional subpoena to the White House is a serious step. It should be the last resort. It is justified only if an unbridgeable impasse between the branches has been reached. None of that is true today. I was chairman of the House Oversight Committee when President George W. Bush was president. I was chairman of the Health and Environment Subcommittee when his father and President Reagan were president. I never issued a subpoena to the White House. I sat down with Fred Fielding, President Bush's White House counsel, and worked out an arrangement that met the Oversight Committee's legitimate needs while preserving the President's rightful prerogatives. And that's what we should be doing here today. And that's what this committee has always done. As John Dingell will tell us, he never issued a subpoena to the White House either. He always worked it out. President Obama's counsel, Kathy Rumler, met with Chairman Upton and Chairman Stearns yesterday. She said that the committee's document request is so broad that it would include everything from the logistics of the President's trip to Solyndra to the President's personal BlackBerry messages. She offered to provide internal White House communications voluntarily without a subpoena if the committee would engage in good faith negotiations to narrow its request. The White House counsel specifically offered to provide the committee with documents that would, 1, show whether the White House intervened on behalf of campaign contributors, and 2, what involvement the White House had in decisions to issue or restructure the loan. That's a lot different than what we just heard from the Republican leadership. They said the White House said they would only pick and choose what to produce or whether they would produce anything at all. These are central issues the committee is investigating, yet the chairmen refused to offer. Apparently what the committee really wants is a confrontation with the president, not information for the investigation. No wonder the public holds this Congress in such low regard. Our focus should be jobs. Our attention should be on rebuilding our economy, not manufacturing controversies with our president. This is an important investigation, but it's hard to avoid the conclusion that the committee is abusing its powers. With every hearing, the inquiry looks more like a rigged process, an investigation by partisan political stunt. And let me just go through the history. In June, we invited Deputy Director of OMB, Jeffrey Zients, to testify with just 4 days' notice. Mr. Zients wasn't available the day the committee wanted, but he said he could testify any other day. So the committee held a hearing with an empty chair. In September, Ranking Member DeGette and I asked the committee to invite Solyndra's executives to testify. When the executive CEO testified, the Republicans on the committee publicly humiliated him for asserting his constitutional rights. At our last hearing, the Republicans accused the Department of Energy of violating the law, but refused to allow anybody from the department to testify to defend the agency. And then the Republican majority resisted releasing exculpatory information. Now today we're being asked to give Chairman Upton a blank check to subpoena the White House when there is no need for this extraordinary step. This is no way to run an investigation. It certainly is no way to run an investigation that should be bipartisan. It is an unprecedented departure from the practices of this committee. We've heard that there is no other choice. Well, I think there is another choice reasonable people would take. To get the White House documents that relate to our investigation. If that is insufficient, we could always go to a subpoena. Instead, we want to go to a subpoena first. And then later we'll see what requests are out of bounds when the White House raises them. I think a subpoena should be used sparingly and only as a last resort. This is not the case that we see today. We are entitled to information from the White House to advance our legitimate oversight needs, not for a fishing expedition by the Republicans. And I think it's sad that we see what's going on here today.
Gentleman's time has expired, and now the chair recognizes the full committee chairman emeritus, Mr. Barton, distinguished gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Chairman Stearns. I was saddened to hear the comments of Ranking Member Waxman just now. We can argue over conclusions and interpretations of facts and documents, but we shouldn't argue over whether the American people through this subcommittee have the right to get those documents to determine what the facts are. Ranking Member Waxman voted against the initial subpoena. I believe every member of the minority party did that. And based on his statement, it appears that he's going to vote against this issuance of a subpoena. That's sad. Again, we've got a long history on this committee of working together to get the facts and then having very spirited debates and arguments over just what the conclusions should be derived from those facts. Mr. Chairman, we're here today because since early this year, we've been trying to get the facts from the Obama White House, and they have steadfastly refused to cooperate. That is a fact. That is not a supposition. We want to know what changed. In January of 2009, the Bush administration Department of Energy made a decision not to proceed with the Solyndra loan. Yet less than 2 months later, the Obama administration Department of Energy made a 180-degree turn and not only decided to fund this particular loan guarantee, they decided to expedite it and even inquired as to whether the president or the vice president might participate in some sort of a tour and photo op at the announcement. What happened? What changed? What made this Mr. Stearns, Mr. Waxman, and Ms. DeGette participated in with the counsel of the White House? In that meeting and in all prior meetings, White House has not claimed executive privilege. They've not claimed that this committee and subcommittee are not entitled to the documents. They've just had various reasons not to produce them. In that same time period, OMB has produced documents, Department of Treasury has produced documents, the Department of Energy has produced documents, the private sector has produced documents, but until apparently, what was it, 6 or 7 o'clock last night, the White House had done nothing but issue press releases and last week announced the appointment of some sort of an independent counsel. Again, this subcommittee has been investigating this on a bipartisan basis for almost a year. We know over $500 million of taxpayer money has gone down the tubes. We know that there have been repeated contacts within the White House from outside forces that were very active in the president's political campaign. We know that pressure was exerted, or at least attempted to be exerted, within the Department of Energy from various officials in the White House, but we don't have an email, we don't have the documents. That's what we're here for today. Again, Mr. Chairman, we can argue over what the documents mean, and we will, but we shouldn't argue over where the American people have a right to what the facts are. This Solyndra investigation has tainted the entire alternative energy program. I happen to be a supporter of loan guarantees for alternative energy. I was chairman when this program was authorized. We now have people on my side of the aisle making serious recommendations to terminate the entire program because it is just not being well run. We need to get the facts. In order to get the facts, we need to get the documents. A lot of the documents are within the White House, Mr. Chairman. The only way, apparently, to get those documents is to subpoena them. We have the authority under the Constitution delegated to get those documents. I would hope that once the White House receives the subpoena, they will comply, and then we can work together to determine what, if anything, can be done to prevent future activities like this occurring, and if something that happened that shouldn't have happened, determine what penalties and what remedial steps need to be taken. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The chair recognizes the past full committee chairman emeritus, the distinguished gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Dingell, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I didn't roll off the cabbage wagon yesterday. I was chairman of this committee for 16 years, and most of that time I was chairman of the Oversight Subcommittee. And I served many subpoenas on many people, but never on the White House. But we always got the information we wanted from the White House. Competent handling of the committee required that we exercise a certain amount of patience, and not that we come in with resolutions like this, which give power that would rival that of Nero. Now, having said this, Democrats want to get the facts. We think that this matter should be properly aired, but I use the word properly. I sometimes threatened the use of a subpoena during my time as chairman, but I was always able to negotiate with the administration a deal which allowed the staff to examine White House documents. We considered a subpoena only as a last resort because it raises a strong possibility of a defense of executive privilege, an area which has much opportunity for the Congress to lose power if we handle it badly. And we worked with the White House, and if you'll observe, we had very few confrontations in this committee over whether subpoenas were going to be issued. And the Democrats on this side supported the subpoenas almost overwhelmingly that were suggested by the Republicans when they ran the subcommittee and the full committee. Now, I've been told that the efforts have been made by the majority staff to do what I have described, and that is to work with the Democrats and with the administration. We do not see it that way over here. And it appears that the Republicans are having a hard time understanding what the meaning of the word yes is. And my question this morning is, what part of it do you not understand? The getting of information in an investigation is a careful, thoughtful work which has to be done with exquisite care and with great attention to all manner of complications and complicated considerations. Now, there's some questions. Why have we not spent more time on getting the documents from the Department of Energy? They voluntarily provided tens of thousands of pages of documents without being issued a subpoena, and they've refused to deliver nothing more on the request of this committee. This subcommittee heard from DOE and OMB jointly, and then invited Solyndra officials who exercised their proper Fifth Amendment rights. Then we also heard from Treasury officials who have no background in energy issues, and they testified that they had no decision-making authority for DOE loans. Why are we now making a leap to issue a White House subpoena with so little pertinent testimony on the record? I'm concerned with the precedent we're setting today by issuing what is essentially a blank check subpoena without any real basis of misbehavior on the part of the White House. As I have said earlier, during 14 years as chairman, I only used subpoenas as a last resort. And we always brought the Republicans in at the earliest moment to discuss the business of the committee, including what information we want, what was going to be done in the hearings, what was the purpose of the investigations, and whether subpoenas were going to be needed or not at the earliest instance when that question became important. I hope that the members of this subcommittee will take a moment to think about the repercussions that this will have on future subpoenas issued by the subcommittee when either Republicans or Democrats are in control, and when either Republicans or Democrats control the White House. I have not agreed oftentimes with Republican presidents that served while I was chairman, but I respected them, I respected the White House, and I respected the traditions of the Congress and the subcommittee. The process of this committee so far has showed a great inclination towards haphazard behavior and clearly shows a lack of respect for the president, and at its base is conducting an event here which forces us to the conclusion that this whole sorry business is politically motivated. The simple fact of the matter is the information has been offered by the White House, more or less formally, to deliver what you want in the way of papers. My advice to you, Mr. Chairman, is to take that opportunity and let us get these investigations back to the point where they are bipartisan rather than where they become, because of bad management and vast haggles between the Republicans and the Democrats about what we're going to do. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired, and I recognize Mr. Sullivan for 1 minute.
Thank you, Chairman Stearns. Thank you for calling this business meeting today to consider a motion authorizing a subpoena for White House records relating to the Department of Energy's stimulus loan guarantee to Solyndra Incorporated. This subcommittee started this important investigation 9 months ago. We've been patient, and to date, the White House has refused to give this subcommittee any documents or other records of communications relating to the loan guarantee to Solyndra. The American people deserve answers because they footed the bill. We know the White House was closely involved in monitoring the Solyndra loan application review by DOE and OMB. The simple fact is we need to learn how extensive the White House involvement was in approving the loan and whether they placed political pressure on OMB and DOE to approve it. At the end of the day, $535 million in taxpayers' money has been lost on the Solyndra loan guarantee, and there are legitimate questions about how this was allowed to happen that need to be answered by the White House. As a longtime critic of the Solyndra loan guarantee, I will vote in favor of this subpoena to ensure that the Obama administration complies with this subcommittee's investigations and stops the delay tactics. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. Ms. Schakowsky is recognized for 1 minute.
So this is the way it's going to be. Yes, we need to determine what happened with Solyndra so the DOE loan guarantee program can be more effective in the future. But the White House has been working with the committee, as the other side has testified to produce materials, I believe, all the relevant materials to the Solyndra loan guarantee, and the White House counsel has offered to work with the committee to produce a more targeted request that addresses the issues relevant to our investigation. I doubt that anything the White House would have agreed to yesterday would have been sufficient. This is a majority that won't take yes for an answer. And while you're at it, why don't you ask for more documents relating to the place of his birth, or as some members want, his school grades, and why not from kindergarten through law school. It seems this is the political trend that we're going to, and I think it's a real shame. I yield back.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Murphy, is recognized for 5 minutes. For 1 minute, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, they said we were unfairly disparaging a reputable solar company. Then they called it a fishing expedition. Next were the handmaidens of coal, oil, gas, and nuclear seeking to tarnish renewable energy projects. They accused the committee of politics, hypocrisy, and score settling, but none of this is true. Today, people say, why rush? Let's delay, wait, give the White House more time. I think that's some smoke and mirrors. The whole purpose of this investigation is to learn the truth, and of that we don't have anything to be afraid of. If there's nothing to hide, turn over the documents. The rule of law still matters, and here's what the law says. No loan can be guaranteed unless they can pay it back, that the buildings can be built, and that taxpayers' positions could not be put behind private investors. If the law has been broken, the taxpayers want to know why $535 million of taxpayers' money is gone. And the money trail still keeps leading to members of the executive branch. This investigation must go on and not be delayed any further. The subpoena needs to be issued because nothing we do in this committee is more important than protecting the taxpayers' money, and they deserve to have an answer now. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Costa, is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I respectfully disagree with the characterization by the majority that the executive branch has not cooperated. I mean, this committee has made 8 formal document requests to the administration, 4 to the Department of Energy, 2 to the White House, to the Treasury Department, to the Office of Management and Budget, and so far over 80,000 pages of documents have been produced. And the White House told the chairs yesterday that more would be produced. They've held in-camera review of documents. They've interviewed all sorts of agency representatives. We've had committee hearings. So I don't know how you can say with a straight face that the administration has not cooperated. The trend has been for very proactive cooperation. And I think the committee majority has a responsibility to be straightforward and honest in the characterization of this investigation, and I regret that they have not done so to date, and that is to the detriment of actually determining the facts of the matter. I go back.
Thank you, gentlelady. The gentleman from Texas, Dr. Burgess, is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the Chairman for the recognition. The ranking member of the subcommittee said that this was unprecedented activity. I do not know as to the accuracy of that, but I do think it's unnecessary. Had the White House not practiced a mantra of delay, 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 and continued to put obstacles in the path of this investigation, we would not be here today. This would have been a one-day story, but the White House has fought every step of the way. Expedite the loan, then when it goes to Chapter 11, obstruct the investigation seems to be the management plan. Now, the ranking member of the full committee said it's no way to run an investigation. I would submit this is no way for the White House to structure a response. They might do well to follow the words of former White House counsel Lanny Davis, who recommended when you have a problem, get it out and get it out early. This White House has run from the investigation. This White House has refused to even assert executive privilege or that they might have documents that would be covered by executive privilege. You know, in fact, if the Democrats had supported the subpoena from the beginning, the White House might have been much more cooperative, and that's the real shame of having to be here today. And I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm disappointed in the way this investigation is being conducted, and I support a full investigation of Solyndra about the subordination and about whether the federal government was a good steward of the taxpayers' dollars. And I agree we must vigorously investigate. What's happening here, though, is wrong. This committee's unprecedented action will be conducive to partisans on both sides digging in and then actually figuring out what went wrong with Solyndra. and I know our former chair of the committee, my colleague Joe Barton from Texas, this program was actually created in 2005 when Congressman Barton was chair of the committee, and I supported the program. And I think we ought to have this program available, but we ought to still see what happened with this investigation. The White House has been cooperating. A subpoena would take this to the next level, and we're just losing the faith and cooperation we've received so far from the White House. I know we could be doing better, but while still cooperating, a subpoena is not necessary. I'm left to believe that today's hearing is more instead about generating sensational headlines and not about living up to our constitutional authority. The subpoena today will pass, and I'll oppose it. Expect my Democrat colleagues to oppose it. It needs to be said that my opposition has nothing to do with protecting the president. It's nothing to do with politics. I oppose the subpoena because it's an abuse of the process. Let's get the investigation started instead of dragging Congress through something that we really don't need. We have the responsibility to carefree and conduct investigations. Allowing this partisan virus to affect our proceeding causes this important matter to lose credibility. Today, the committee is like throwing chum to the sharks instead of treating this with respect and reverence that the American people expect. I yield back my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentlelady from Tennessee is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At a June 2008 presidential debate, then-candidate Obama received a question about President Bush's use of executive privilege. President Obama responded, and I'm quoting, "You know, as I recall, Richard Nixon mounted similar arguments. That's not how we operate. We're a nation of laws and not men and women. So, you know, and that's a precedent I don't mind living with as President of the United States," end quote. Since we first began our investigation back in February, we've worked diligently with our friends across the aisle and everyone involved. We've tried to be cooperative, thoughtful, and thorough in conducting oversight that our constituents would deem worthy of the responsibility that they have given us. However, without any real explanation, this administration has continually delayed the release of pertinent information that is required in order to conduct a systematic and comprehensive review. The American people have the right to know. They expect us to get to the bottom of the Solyndra issue. I yield back.
Gentlelady from the Virgin Islands is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The White House has already agreed to cooperate with the committee on this investigation, and in all of their testimonies and documents turned over so far, they've been true to their word. With every president, Republican and Democrat, executive privilege has been exerted over congressional requests. This president has done nothing more than that. And so I, too, have to ask the question, what is different in the case of President Barack Obama? We do have a responsibility to investigate, and we should continue with what we have. But this is not the priority of our fellow Americans. They need jobs. As the representatives on a committee with broad oversight and therefore the great potential for job creation, that is what we must turn our attention to. While we may be able to wait to get more information on Solyndra, the people of this country are demonstrating they cannot wait. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. Ms. Myrick is recognized for 1 minute.
I will yield my time.
Gentlelady yields her time. Mr. Ross, do you yield 1 minute?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm saddened by what we're dealing with today. I think it's way premature. I support a full and thorough investigation of Solyndra and anyone else that's involved in this, including the administration. But the fact is, the administration is cooperating with House investigators at this time. They provided more than 80,000 pages of documents. The administration, in fact, turned over 15,000 pages of documents to the committee this week, including about 1,200 pages of communication between the White House and the Energy Department. And at a time when the American people want to see us working together and to put country before party, it seems like this is nothing more than a political gimmick, because the reality is the administration is working with this committee. Should it stop, then I would support this. But at this time, they're fully participating, cooperating, and I think the investigation should continue, and it should include everyone with any knowledge about any of this, and let's get to the bottom of it. But let's not have these votes and take these actions just for what may or may not be political gain for someone. It's time for us to all come together, work together, and put country before party.
Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Gingrey is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. This is a serious investigation of a loan program for renewable energy administered by the Department of Energy. This program was modified by the stimulus bill, and Section 1705 essentially allowed for no doc and no money down loans, which surely contributed to this Solyndra fiasco. Now, our colleagues on the other side of the aisle were given an opportunity several months ago when a subpoena was issued to the OMB for records, and of course they voted against that subpoena. We have subsequently received very valuable records, and now they have another opportunity. They have an opportunity today to vote yes or no, to do the right thing and agree with us that subpoena of the Executive Office of the President and the Office of the Vice President is entirely necessary. This is a very serious investigation. They have admitted that. The White House has admitted that. Let's be teammates here in this effort, because the American taxpayer deserves nothing less. And I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Mr. Scalise is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With over $535 million of taxpayer money at stake, you would think that the White House would be willing to cooperate and give us the information that we've been requesting. From the very beginning of this investigation, when our committee started looking into this Solyndra scandal, the Obama administration has refused to comply with the basic requests we've asked for. In fact, they've failed to live up to the very transparency that President Obama tried to make a hallmark of his campaign. And taxpayer money got lost in the process. If they would have complied with us at the beginning, we may have been able to protect the taxpayer money. Yet here we are again, after, unfortunately, a partisan attempt to block us from getting the information we already got that's been so important in releasing this information. Now we're trying to get more information that the White House still will not give us. They keep saying, oh, well, we've given you enough already. Well, the target of investigation doesn't get to decide what they are going to comply with and what they're not. The White House is not above the law. And there's taxpayer money that's still at risk. There are other loans that are outstanding, and we're just trying to get basic information. And the White House has played a heavy hand in this scandal from the very beginning. We've seen that in the emails we already got. I don't know why they're not complying with us today. They should be sitting at the table saying, what do you need? We want to resolve this problem. Instead, they're still trying to obfuscate. It's time for them to come clean, work with us, and finally get to the bottom of this scandal of Solyndra. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. And Mr. Garner, recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This subcommittee has been investigating the Solyndra affair for months. In that time, this investigation has been slow-walked, delayed, and turned away. You cannot lose $500 million of taxpayer money and not provide answers. I had hoped that everyone had shared in this value, but apparently not. If there is nothing to hide, then why hide? I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed too, not because that we have to seek answers, but because there seems to be so many people who are unwilling to seek those answers. I'm curious to know where the spirit of cooperation was when we sent the original letter requesting these documents. This subcommittee has a fundamental right to conduct oversight of the matters within our jurisdiction, and the resistance that we have been met with from the executive branch is simply unacceptable. I'm hopeful that after taking this step, the White House will begin to take this matter seriously and show some initiative to get to the bottom of this issue. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized for 1 minute.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, the White House is saying they want to cooperate. The White House is saying they want to provide all of the relevant documents. But you're saying no. And, of course, the reason you're saying no is that from the minute you took over in January, you have had a concerted effort to destroy the renewable energy program in the budget that you passed, the Ryan budget. It reduced by 70% next year and by 90% over the next 3 years of the money for clean energy. In April, when you brought the government to the brink of shutdown, you successfully rescinded $18 billion for renewables, but left in $22 billion for nuclear and $8 billion for coal loan guarantees. That's what this is all about. This is just a continuing pattern where the coal and nuclear industry wants this competitive wind and solar industry to grow. And we still haven't had any announcement of an investigation of the loan guarantee for this Southern company for 2 nuclear power plants that are proposed to be constructed on earthquake faults down in the South. So let's talk about that post-Fukushima. Let's examine whether or not the economics of that work at all.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Nebraska is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, and appreciate allowing me this 1 minute. And frankly, I'm one of many on this side that have worried that the actions of the administration in providing not loans, but now just massive grants to Solyndra and SunPower and what appears to be under political persuasion or favors or cronyism or something has endangered renewables more than any Ryan budget. The actions here by the administration has created a public perception that this is an unstable, corrupt industry, and I don't think that's a fair label, although there's going to be several examples of evidence of that, and that's why we have to make sure that our investigation is complete and that we have these appropriate documents, and I yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Griffith from Virginia is recognized for 1 minute.
Cooperation, cooperation, but there is no cooperation. 2 months ago, we asked the White House for cooperation, and still we wait. Every step of the way, the minority has opposed this investigation. I would like all the information on this matter to be public. $500 million of taxpayer money gone, 75 million subordinated, making the taxpayers second place or second class creditors, and in my opinion in violation of the law. And the American people need to know who was involved in the decision-making process, who knew what, when, and when did they know it. It appears a subpoena is the only way to truly find out this information. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. It appears to me there's no further opening statements. The chair calls up the resolution and asks the clerk to report.
A resolution offered by Mr. Stearns. Be it resolved by the Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations that, upon the adoption of this resolution, the Chairman of the Committee on Energy and Commerce may authorize and issue subpoenas duces tecum to both 1. William Daley, White House Chief of Staff, or appropriate custodian of records, White House, and 2. Bruce Reed, Chief of Staff to the Vice President, or appropriate custodian of records, the Office of the Vice President, relating to the committee's investigation of the following matter. A loan guarantee made to Solyndra, Inc. by the United States Department of Energy on September 2, 2009. This resolution is adopted pursuant to the Rule 11, Clause 2, M1 and 3 of the Rules of the U.S. House of Representatives.
Mr. Chairman,
The gentlelady is recognized.
I have a motion at the desk. Pursuant to Rule 16, Clause 4, I move that the Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations postpone consideration of the resolution authorizing the issuance of subpoenas to the White House regarding the Solyndra loan guarantee until November 15, 2011.
The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes in support of her motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this morning we've been haggling around about whether or not the White House has been responsive to the committee's request for documents. And we all agree that a subpoena to the White House is unprecedented in this committee, and if there's any way to get the White House to cooperate with us and to provide the documents, that would be the very best result, both in terms of getting the evidence we want without getting involved in a prolonged court battle with the White House over executive privilege, and it would also help us get the evidence that we need in this investigation. I'd just like to take a couple of minutes to clarify exactly what has happened here, because to be honest, On both sides of the aisle, I think there has been some real confusion as to what requests were made to the White House and to the rest of the executive branch and when they were made. This committee's first document request to the White House related to the Solyndra loan guarantee was sent on September 1st of this year, approximately 2 months ago. It asked for all communications between the White House and Solyndra as well. Let me say that again. It asked for all communications between the White House and Solyndra, as well as any communications between the White House and, quote, the investors in Solyndra, Inc., including the administrators, employees, attorneys, agents, advisors, consultants, staff, principals, or any other persons acting on behalf of those investors. The White House, Mr. Chairman, responded to the September 1st request with document productions on September 13th, September 30th, and October 7th, totaling 968 pages. Now, there have been subsequent communications between this committee and the White House in which the White House has asserted, and I don't completely agree with the White House position on this, but they asserted that that many of the documents that had been produced by the DOE and OMB were also documents that were included in this committee's September 1st request. And so there have been a number of back and forth communications about those documents. And now, Mr. Chairman, there was this meeting yesterday, which we've all talked about, where the majority was there, the minority was there, and the White House, as well as many staffers, in which I heard the White House counsel clearly say that she believed that this was a legitimate investigation. She believed that documents relating to anything about this loan guarantee were appropriate, including, she said, documents about communications with White House political donors and others, and she volunteered to work with committee staff to further narrow the scope. And then later yesterday, after many conversations between our staffs and the White House, as I said in my opening statement, the White House offered to produce more documents in the 4 areas that I delineated before and that was delineated in the letter that Mr. Waxman and I sent to you last night. So it seems to me, Mr. Chairman, that the White House is attempting to cooperate with this committee's investigation. And for my part, and for Mr. Waxman, Mr. Dingell, and the rest of the members on this side of the aisle, we would urge the White House to go overboard in cooperating with this committee's investigation. But it is inaccurate if anybody intends to leave the impression that the White House documents were requested 8 months ago. That is incorrect. They were requested 2 months ago, and there have been good faith efforts to produce documents. Secondly, Mr. Chairman, I've reviewed the proposed subpoena. We got that from your staff late last night to the White House, and it is a very, very broad subpoena. It says documents to be produced, all documents in the possession of the Executive Office of the President relating to the $535 million loan guarantee to Solyndra, Inc. by the Department of Energy, including but not limited to notes, analyses, reports, memoranda, and all drafts of such documents. My concern, Mr. Chairman, is twofold. The first one is, since you're dealing with a very broad document request, there may be many thousands of pages of documents that are irrelevant to this committee's investigation, which would slow us down in trying to figure out exactly what happened with the Solyndra loan. The second concern I have is if the White House then asserts executive privilege and we end up in court and this is further delayed. And so what I've done in my motion is I've said, let's delay this subpoena until November 15th. That's 2 days before Secretary Chu is scheduled to come in and testify before this committee. Let's try to work to get the documents that would be relevant so that we can question Secretary Chu on them. And then if the White House still refuses to produce documents, we can come back and look at it at that point. That would be my suggestion, and I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Lady yields back the balance of her time. In opposition to the motion to postpone, I recognize the full committee chairman. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Upton.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would strike the last word, and I rise in strong opposition to this amendment. We have been trying to get information now for months. We've sent a number of letters. I would note that last week I informed Mr. Waxman that we were going to ask for a business meeting this week, and that at the same time I was going to call Bill Daley and urge a course of action that perhaps we could have avoided today's business session. Though I didn't speak to Bill Daley on Thursday, I left a very detailed message where I thought that it would be prudent for the White House Counsel's Office to reach out to the committee staff either Thursday or Friday or over the weekend just to see if we could get this resolved, because we were not at all satisfied with the response from the letters that we had sent to the White House. He chose to reach out to me on Tuesday afternoon of this week. I again made the same request, and in fact we had the meeting with the White House Counsel yesterday morning with both Mr. Waxman and Ms. DeGette and their staff present as part of that meeting. They knew that we were going to sit down with the Republican members at 4:30 yesterday afternoon to make a final decision as to whether we would move ahead today. And though they had indicated yesterday morning that they might be willing to put something on paper, not necessarily a letter, 4:30 came and went, 5 o'clock came and went. I spoke to Mr. Dingell on the phone about 6 o'clock last night and indicated our frustration with the full knowledge that the White House knew that we were sitting down at 4:30, and in fact we knew that for hours. The DOE had dumped documents, not to us, but to the press, and I didn't see that as a sign of good faith. And again, as I said in my opening statement, it was about 6:45 last night when we received a written response from the White House. And that had no sense of timing when we would see any production. I would say that when we went to through the exercise last July of seeking the subpoena then, it was only that finally began to see some cooperation by OMB to provide documents which led us to where we are today. Hey, I'm a former White House official. You have bad stories from time to time. And when those happen, frankly, from the White House perspective, it is best to get them resolved and get them over with versus the drip, drip, drip of bad news. We don't want to delay this investigation anymore. We have seen $500 million of taxpayer money out the door. And we are likely now, and we're going to be signing some more letters today, of other loan guarantees that have gone bust as well. It has plagued the whole issue of alternative energy and things that we had passed on a bipartisan basis under Mr. Barton's leadership. And it's time that we get to the bottom of this whole mess. And that means we need cooperation from the White House. We have not seen it so far, and that is why we're moving ahead with this subpoena resolution. And I would ask my colleagues on both sides to oppose this resolution, and I yield back. I would move to table the motion that is before us.
The question is on the motion to table, the motion to postpone. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no.
Chairman, I asked for a recorded
vote. The ayes have it, and the motion to postpone is tabled. The request for a table vote, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Terry. Mr. Terry votes aye. Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Murphy. Mr. Burgess. Mr. Burgess votes aye. Mrs. Blackburn. Mrs. Blackburn votes aye. Mrs. Myrick. Mrs. Myrick votes aye. Mr. Bilbray. Mr. Gingrey. Mr. Gingrey votes aye. Mr. Scalise. Mr. Scalise votes aye. Mr. Gardner. Mr. Gardner votes aye. Mr. Griffith. Mr. Griffith votes aye. Mr. Barton. Mr. Barton votes aye. Mr. Upton. Mr. Upton votes aye. Ms. DeGette.
No.
Ms. DeGette votes no. Ms. Schakowsky. Ms. Schakowsky votes no. Mr. Ross. Mr. Ross votes no. Ms. Castor. Ms. Castor votes no. Mr. Markey. Mr. Markey votes no. Mr. Green. Mr. Green votes no. Ms. Christensen. Ms. Christensen votes no. Mr. Dingle? Mr. Dingle votes no. Mr. Waxman? No. Mr. Waxman votes no. Chairman Stearns?
Aye.
Chairman Stearns votes aye.
Mr. Sullivan?
Aye.
Mr. Sullivan votes aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Mr. Murphy votes aye.
Clerk will report the results. Anyone else wishes to vote? Change their vote? If not, the clerk will report.
Mr. Chairman, on that vote, there were 13 yeas, 9 nays.
The ayes have it. The motion to postpone is tabled.
Mr. Chairman?
The gentleman from California.
I seek recognition to strike the last word. Mr. Chairman, we have the unfortunate situation of Solyndra's bankruptcy and the loss of taxpayers' funds. I think it's appropriate that this committee investigate how this happened, not only to find out what happened in the past, but to make sure it doesn't happen in the future. Who's involved in such a loan? Well, first of all, it's the Department of Energy. They are the ones who make the decision. Who else is involved? The Office of Management and Budget, because they review the decision. So our committee asked DOE for information, and we got 65,000 pages from them, including correspondence that they had with the White House about this loan. Some people at OMB had a different opinion about Solyndra, and so we asked OMB for their information. Before they had a chance to get it to the Congress, this committee moved to subpoena them, which I thought was premature and inappropriate. But it is a far different thing to subpoena the OMB than to subpoena the President of the United States. I don't think subpoena should be rushed into under any circumstance if there's an opportunity to work things out. We didn't give an opportunity to OMB to work things out. We slammed them with a subpoena, which I opposed as premature, not because I didn't want to get the information. But let us review where we are now with the White House. The White House counsel met with Mr. Upton and Mr. Stearns and Mr. Gett and myself and our staffs and outlined how they want to proceed to get the information that was important for our committee's investigation. They acknowledged it's a legitimate investigation. They acknowledged that we're entitled to the information. They said that they would get us information on the core concerns of the committee, whether Solyndra's loan decisions were inappropriately influenced by political contributions. That statement's been made as if it were already established. We haven't even gotten all the facts, and the Republicans have jumped to that conclusion. There's no evidence yet to support it, but we ought to get all the information to see if it's true. And the White House said they'll give us that information. They also said that they'd give us White House involvement in the conditional loan guarantee, the commitment, the loan guarantee closing, and the loan restructuring. Those are the reasons we have an investigation. So the White House outlined all of this, and what Mr. Upton just told us is that they didn't give him anything in writing before his 4:30 meeting. So because they got him something in writing at 6:30, we're going to go to the unprecedented step of a subpoena. Hey, give me a break. 2 hours? The White House is trying to cooperate. Republican after Republican today said the White House has refused to give us anything. It's just not true. In my experience in Congress, I've never seen a situation where on a bipartisan basis, if somebody asked for more time, you didn't give them more time. We could have given them a little bit more time to make clear we're getting the information that's pertinent. Well, why is the White House still saying they don't want to comply with all the information that's been requested? Because the information request is so broad that it could be a violation of executive privilege. The White House has not claimed executive privilege, but if someone is discussing whether the president should go to the Solyndra's factory, and then all these different people in the White House are involved in the logistics, and the president might have contacted somebody in the staff, that's just not information that is pertinent to our investigation. It becomes a fishing expedition. It intrudes on the prerogatives of the presidency. The presidency, not just this president. So I just really think that if you would look at this question seriously, you don't need to have a subpoena vote today because the White House didn't give Mr. Upton his written statement. They gave them everything but. They gave them a clear elucidation of what information they would provide to the committee. After that information has been provided, we can see what else we need. Do we need the information that was directed to whether the president should enter the west side or the east side of the company headquarters? There's some things we don't need, and there's some things that are just inappropriate for us to ask. So I would urge opposition to the subpoena, and I would even urge that the chairman of the full committee rethink his position in light of what he just said. They didn't give you the information that you wanted by your 4:30 meeting, and therefore we're going to go to the unprecedented step that was never taken by any chairman of this committee or subcommittee chairman of this committee, to issue a subpoena to the White House. Yield back my time.
As Chairman, Chairman strikes the last word and recognizes himself in support of the resolution. My colleagues, as chairman of the subcommittee, I feel compelled to offer this resolution. We have exercised restraint and patience during the course of this over 8-month investigation, and the administration has resisted our efforts every step of the way. Now, earlier this year, OMB repeatedly failed to cooperate with our investigation, and we agreed to put off a vote on that subpoena because we were assured that engaging in a dialogue with the administration and the minority would... Thank you for your attention. We were assured that engaging in a dialogue with the administration and the minority would resolve all of the problems without the need to resort to a subpoena. But that was just a stalling technique. We were forced to issue a subpoena several weeks later, but the administration had won the delay that they were seeking. The administration seems to think that if they can just drag this investigation out, that we will give up and simply go away. But we won't. We have a constitutional duty to investigate this matter pursuant to our oversight and legislative functions. We have an obligation to the American people to find out what went wrong with this loan guarantee program. Why have 2 of the first 3 companies that received these loan guarantees failed? Why was the taxpayers' money subordinated in the Solyndra loan? And why were so many warning signs and red flags simply ignored? My colleagues, this is a serious investigation. $500 million of taxpayers' money appears to be lost. This is not a fishing expedition. We already have documents that show that the White House was involved in decisions that related to Solyndra. We want answers, and so do the American taxpayers. It is unfortunate that it has come to this, but we do not have any faith in the White House overtures that seem to simply want to delay and obstruct. I request that members of this subcommittee join me in their full support for this resolution to authorize the Chairman Upton of the full committee to issue subpoenas to the White House. Is there any further discussion on the resolution?
Mr. Chairman.
This gentleman recognize Mr. Markey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Strike the last.
It's a strike. I asked unanimous consent to strike the last word.
So ordered.
Mr. Chairman, in my 35 years in Congress, I have presided over the issuance of only one subpoena in the time that I served as a committee chairman. It, too, concerned an environmental policy matter that began during the Bush administration, but unlike this subpoena, for every single internal White House email related to Solyndra, the one I issued was issued on a bipartisan basis with my ranking member, Republican member, Jim Sensenbrenner, fully supporting my efforts to learn more about the Bush administration's response to global warming. It was a bipartisan effort because we exhausted all other avenues for obtaining the information from the Bush administration first. That has not happened here. The Obama administration has been cooperating with the committee and has said it would continue to do so. The White House just yesterday offered to share internal White House emails on all issues that are being debated about the Solyndra loan guarantee. By contrast, what my subpoena requested was just 2 documents. One of these had been attached to a single email that EPA sent, but that the White House never even opened. The Bush administration White House didn't just refuse to provide them voluntarily, they refused to comply with the subpoena at all until the Select Committee scheduled a business meeting to consider a contempt motion. This committee should accept the accommodation offer the White House made. Subpoenas should be the last resort used to obtain information when the subject of an inquiry has failed to fully cooperate. In stark contrast to today's zeal for issuing subpoenas to the White House, yesterday, Republicans were singing a very different tune. Over in the Natural Resources Committee, 100 yards away, Republicans voted unanimously against my motion to subpoena the CEOs of BP, Transocean, Halliburton, and Cameron, who refused, that's right, refused to appear at a hearing before our committee to testify as to what has happened since the BP oil spill. We weren't asking for hundreds of thousands of pages of emails or documents. We just wanted the opportunity to question them about the environmental catastrophe that actually was the result of illegal activity in the Gulf of Mexico. While insisting on full disclosure and complete transparency from the White House on Solyndra, Republicans have put the CEOs from the companies responsible for the worst offshore oil spill in our history into a witness protection program where they are apparently going to be immune from any congressional or public scrutiny. When it comes to solar energy, Republicans embrace the disinfecting power of sunlight and disclosure. When it comes to oil, they seem to prefer to hide behind its murky sheen. This debate isn't about using our committee's subpoena power. This is about fossil fuel and nuclear fuel interests not wanting more Americans using solar power. That's what it's all about. That's the bottom line in this debate. And you have to see this story in 2 parts. BP, oil, a crime, not a word. We don't want to meet these people. But here, with full cooperation coming from the White House, they insist on issuing subpoenas. That's all you really need to know. That's what this debate's all about. The fossil fuel and nuclear industry trying to kill what is now the growing industry. 100,000 employees in the solar industry, 85,000 employees in the wind industry, 85,000 employees in the coal industry. That's what it's all about, bottom line. They're growing too fast. Their share of electrical generation is growing too fast. We've got to slow them down and put a cloud over their ability to raise funding in the private capital markets, and we're going to do it at the expense of full procedural safeguards being given to all of those who come before this Congress. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Texas recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Strike to necessary.
I asked to strike the last word.
Thank you.
I've listened with interest to my friends on the Democratic side, and they really are my friends. I mean, John Dingell, Mr. Green, Mr. Markey, Mr. Gett, Mr. Waxman, they're all people that I have great respect for and great affection for. And we know that on this committee where we debate the big issues, we're going to have spirited debates. But I must say that I'm reminded of the old Popeye, a cartoon character, Wimpy. Remember Wimpy, kind of a Raleigh-Polly, good guy. Everybody loved him. He was always trying to mooch hamburgers off people. He would gladly pay you Tuesday. I will gladly pay you Tuesday. Mr. Gatt has offered a motion that they're all for the investigation in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks. You know, they don't want to support it today, but they'll support it on November the 14th. And Mr. Waxman's all for the investigation, but it's premature to
subpoena documents from the White House. It's the same Mr. Waxman that, when he was chairman of a ranking member over in the Government Reform Committee, offered all kinds of document requests to the Bush White House, the Energy Task Force, things of that sort. And Mr. Markey is upset because over in another committee that we don't, in fact, I would say most of the members of this committee are not big fans of the other committee that he's the ranking member on, because their chairman tried to take all our jurisdiction at the start of this Congress. So I don't know how you can associate us with those guys. We're here today because $500 million of taxpayer money is gone. And the company that took the loan had been rejected by the Bush administration in January, and then the Obama administration comes in and approves it and expedites it and even thought about doubling down on it, although they didn't, to their credit. And we've been trying to get some documents, and we've got a lot of documents, and the minorities pointed out the Department of Energy and OMB and the Treasury Department have provided documents on a voluntary basis, but the White House has not. And if you read the letters that Mr. Upton sent and the letters that the White House responded to him, the bottom line is that the White House says it's not necessary. That's almost, I think, a verbatim quote. So we want to get the facts, and the only way to get the facts is to issue a subpoena. Some have said that our subpoena request is too broad. Well, I was oversight chairman when the Republicans first came into the majority back in 1995, and we took the language almost, if not exactly, verbatim from oversight request that Mr. Dingell had been using when he was full committee and subcommittee chairman. I will at the appropriate time, as my good friend knows. So, we may have updated it because back in those days, email wasn't a big thing and BlackBerrys didn't exist. But our basic subpoena request and document request is a standard format that Democrats have used and Republicans have used on this committee literally for decades. So, and with all due respect, I understand my friends on the Democratic side have to walk a fine line. They have to protect the president of their own party, but they also have to try to be objective and support an investigation. It's gratifying to know that they and the White House have magnanimously decided that this is a legitimate investigation. We appreciate that. We knew that all along. But if you really want to get the facts, and the White House doesn't want to comply, doesn't want to cooperate, they just want to sandbag and drag their feet and gladly comply next Tuesday, then we have to issue this subpoena. It has to be broad, and then we have to insist that it be complied with. So, with all due respect, I would say that we should vote on this, and then let's work together to get the documents, and then dissect them, review them, analyze them, and then we can have a debate about what the conclusions are. And with that, I would yield to Mr. Dingell, if he still wants.
Well, I expressed my affection for the gentleman from Texas, but I want to observe several things. First of all,
will the gentleman suspend for? You only have 6 seconds left.
Well, I ask unanimous consent that he have 2 additional minutes.
Well, no, you can recognize yourself for 5 minutes if you want to strike.
He was saying he had affection for me. Let him continue.
All right. I recognize the chairman emeritus in the past for a full 5 minutes.
I don't want to be recognized for full 5 minutes. Okay. I just want to be recognized for what the gentleman said. So I ask that he be given additional.
I would ask unanimous consent for 1 additional minute. So
all right.
So ordered.
Tell of his affection for him.
And I thank the gentleman. Now let me make one observation. 1, I never served a subpoena on the White House. 2, the subpoenas were always discussed with the minority. We had a policy that we would always discuss them before we issued them. I did that with the gentleman from Texas, and I did it with every other ranking Republican member when I was the chairman either of the subcommittee or the full committee. None of those things are being complied with here. This is a vast fishing expedition where you're asking for everything from the president's schedule to his travel plans to where he was going to meet on any matter related to this investigation. This is a fishing expedition, and there's no way of getting around that.
Gentlemen, yield back the balance of my time. Back. Okay. Anyone else seeks further discussion of this resolution?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Gentleman from Georgia.
I move to strike the requisite number of words. Mr. Chairman, quite honestly, what we're dealing with here, we are the subcommittee on oversight and investigation. We have a responsibility to the American people, to the taxpayers. This loan program for renewable energy, plussed up by the stimulus bill, is some $36 billion worth of taxpayer money. Now, there's an article, I believe it's in Politico today, talking about 100 criminal investigations that have already been initiated by the Inspector General in the Department of Energy. Now, I don't know about you folks, but to me that sounds like a heck of a lot in a program, a bill that was just passed in February of 2009, and we already have 100 criminal investigations. Now, you think back to the time when the Community Reinvestment Act was passed back in the 70s, and then, of course, plussed up in the 90s, and you had the efforts of organizations like Acorn pushing banks to get out these no money down loans. All kind of red flags were raised over a number of years, and it was ignored until finally we got this country into one mell of a hess. And so for us to sit here and drag our feet on something like this and say that it's nothing but a fishing expedition and a witch hunt and it's all political, and that's clearly not the case. My good friend from Massachusetts talked about I think he put it, a murky sheen. Well, look, we need to get a clear view of these related documents from the Executive Office of the White House. And what they're doing is putting up a murky sheen. Let me just say, in conclusion, as I yield back, it's time for us to get out the Windex.
Will the gentleman
yield
to me for a question?
Yes, I will yield.
You said 100 criminal investigations by the IGs. I don't believe that's an accurate statement. IG may look at whether things were done properly or not, but every time they look at a matter, it doesn't become a criminal investigation. The only investigation I know is the FBI of the Solyndra matter. So if you have further information on the 100 criminal investigations, could you give it to us?
Well, I will be happy to give that to you, and I'll refer you to the articles this morning in Politico. And if there's any inaccuracies of what I say, I'll certainly be willing to retract those. These investigations, 100 investigations, they may not have all been criminal. I may be mistaken on that, but 100 investigations have been initiated by the Inspector General of the Department of Energy over this loan program for renewable startups. And that's the facts that I've read this morning in this article on Politico, and I'll refer you to that.
Does the gentleman yield back the balance of his time?
He does.
Okay. Does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition? Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I asked to strike the requisite number of words.
Gentleman's recognized.
And I have questions to direct to the Chief Counsel of Subcommittee. Is he here, please?
He's not in the room, but...
well, then I asked that the clock not begin to run on me till I've got him there to ask questions.
Well, he's presently in the room now, so we welcome
him. If he'll come down to the witness table, and if the chair will start the 5 minutes when he gets there, I'll be delighted to proceed.
Well, your 5 minutes starts also. I don't think we can quibble on about 15, 20 seconds.
No, I'm counting 22 seconds.
All right, go ahead. We'll give you that.
All right. These are yes or no questions. Counsel, have you included the minority staff in any and all meetings with members of DOE, OMB, and White House? Yes or no?
I'm sorry, sir. Can you repeat that again? I couldn't hear it.
Have you included minority staff in any and all meetings with members of DOE, OMB, and White House? Yes or no? Doesn't require a lot of thought. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Have you shared any and all details of your meetings with the minority?
I think my previous response was they've been involved in all of those meetings.
Yes or no?
Yes, I believe so, sir.
Have you requested documents from Solyndra?
No, sir.
Have you requested documents from OMB?
Yes, sir.
Have you received all the documents requested from OMB?
No, sir.
You have not?
No, sir.
Will you put in the record what those are, if you please? Have you requested documents from the White House?
Yes, sir.
Have you received those documents?
No.
When would you submit for the record what were the dates on which the requests were made in each instance?
Sure.
Have all these documents been shared with the minority staff when they were received?
Yes.
Did you share with the minority staff all documents being requested at the initial designation of the document request as set forth in the resolution and the subpoena? Yes or no?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Have you shared with the minority the list of documents which are being considered for receipt under the subpoena and the resolution that we have before us?
Yes, we gave a copy of the schedule that we're attaching to the subpoena.
All right. Have you received documents showing that the White House directed DOE to approve the loan to Solyndra?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Have you received documents showing that the White House directed DOE to approve the loan to Solyndra? Yes
Well,
or
first
no?
of all, sir, we don't have all the documents, and that's sort of a matter of interpretation.
Okay. All right. Has the minority council seen the documents that you have requested from the White House and directed DOE to approve the loan to Solyndra?
We don't have the full production, sir, but everything that we've gotten, we've directed, and our instructions direct the targets of our document request to send copies directly to the minority. My understanding is that they have received them at the same time that we have, every production.
Now, my staff did not receive a copy of the subpoena until 10 p.m. last night, so I've just only read it recently. Is there a clarification on the subpoena resolution or anywhere that the majority justifies the need for this subpoena? And if so, where? Yes or no?
I'm not sure what you mean by is there a clarification. We send copies of the subpoena up until the time.
Well, have you defined what the documents are that you are requesting?
There
so
are
that they know what it is you are requesting.
Well,
the subpoena and the resolution are literally without limits. And I'm trying to find out what are the limits and what are the documents requested in the subpoena so we know what we're voting for.
Well, I disagree that it's without limits, or there isn't.
You may agree or disagree, but the answer to the question is yes or no.
Then I would say that the answer is no. I disagree with that.
Now, in lieu of, does the subpoena ask for specific documents that the majority knows the White House has not turned over? Yes or no?
The subpoena does not ask for particular.
That's precisely the point I make. The subpoena asks for just about damn near anything that they've got down there. Now, in lieu of issuing a subpoena, have you held discussions with the White House to find out whether a compromise can be arranged with the White House, either to turn over the documents or to allow majority and minority staff to review the documents in the presence of White House counsel? Yes or no?
We have repeatedly requested to have discussions with the White House and open up a dialogue with the White House.
Have they said yes to that or no?
Well, that didn't happen until yesterday after we noticed, we let them know last week that we were noticing.
So it happened.
Would the gentleman yield? And I would ask unanimous consent. The gentleman from Michigan have an additional minute, and I would ask if the gentleman yield for a question for me or a statement for me.
I'll yield for a question.
All right. Well, I would just note that the resolution offered by Mr. Stearns authorizes the chairman, that would be me, in essence, to authorize, be it resolved, the Subcommittee on Oversight, upon adoption, the Chairman of the Committee on Energy and Commerce may authorize and issue a subpoena. Doesn't indicate specifically what the request will be, but as I said in my opening statement, and I quote, we fully intend to take last night's proposal into consideration as we refine the scope of the subpoena and work with the White House on its document production.
That's mighty comforting,
Well,
but
just-
not sufficiently comforting.
If the
I would
gentleman will
observe
continue
to my
yield-
beloved friend here that
Yeah.
we got the subpoena. I got it last night. I don't know when the White House got it.
only
And
one
I
sentence
don't
long.
know what it is you are asking in the subpoena. That's what I'm trying to find out.
Well, if-
so that I
if-
know whether the minority's been included in this, whether the committee has an understanding of what is constituted in this splendid set of documents that you've given us, which give you authority, I think, that approximates that of Nero. And what I'm being told here is splendid.
If the gentleman will yield, I just, as I said in my opening statement, we intend to take last night's small step of cooperation here we intend to write it. If the vote is there to approve this.
I will support that, and I will support the gentleman in getting the books and the papers and the records that he wants in a proper and a traditional way. And for that reason, I move at this time the committee adjourn.
The gentleman makes a motion that this committee adjourn. Is that what I understand the gentleman's motion is? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no.
No.
Appears to me the noes have it. The committee will continue, and we'll move. Is there any further discussion on the resolution before the vote occurs? If not,
Mr. Chairman, I'm
all
going
those.
to strike the last word.
Sure. Glenn,
I just want to respond to what the chairman said very briefly, which is that he would use the discussions that happened last night as the parameters of the subpoena. Yesterday in the meeting that we all had, I asked committee staff to give me the draft subpoena, which is the subpoena Mr. Dingle is referring to that he and I and Mr. Waxman received at 10 p.m. last night. And I guess I would ask the chairman, because your staff gave us this subpoena, and this subpoena.
If the gentleman, lady,
let me just finish my sentence. This subpoena says all documents in the possession of the Executive Office of the President relating to the $535 million loan guarantee issued to Solyndra, Inc. by the Department of Energy, including but not limited to notes, analyses, reports, memoranda, and all drafts of such documents. So this is the subpoena that the committee staff has advised us that it intends to serve upon the White House. And I would ask that that be included in the record. And I would just ask the chairman, is it not true that that's the subpoena you intend to serve upon them?
Do you are you giving time to Mr. Upton?
Yes, I'll yield to the chairman to answer.
Sorry, I didn't hear the very end of your statement. I said this resolution that we're voting on today authorizes the chairman of the Energy and Commerce, me, to issue a subpoena. That subpoena, you've seen some draft language. It's not done yet. And that was done, that draft language was written long before we received the statement last night. And it's not done. And as I said in my opening statement, we're going to use what the White House presented to us last night.
Reclaiming my time, Mr. Chairman. Actually, this subpoena was provided to us after the White House made its statement. So,
gentlelady, yield to me.
I yield to Mr.
Well, I'd like to see the subpoena. I'd like to vote for that subpoena if it really does take into consideration all the information you're going to receive. But what we're being asked to do is to vote for a subpoena. We were shown one subpoena. Now we're told we're just authorizing you to make up a subpoena later. Come in and ask for a subpoena when you're ready to issue it, not ask us now to give you the power to issue subpoenas. That doesn't strike me as that's putting the cart before the horse. Yield back.
And I'll yield back to the chairman if he'd like to clarify what it is he intends to do, because Now it makes me even more concerning about what this resolution is actually asking for.
This resolution that the gentlelady will yield, this resolution authorizes the chairman of the Energy and Commerce to authorize and issue a subpoena. That subpoena, we've looked at a number of different things. You've seen a draft. Draft is a draft. It's not done till it's done. We are going to take, as I said in my opening statement, last night's proposal into consideration as we look at a final document should this committee vote to authorize me to send a subpoena. There are some things we're going to take this discussion of what the White House provided last night. We'll probably add a few things. Not sure exactly what that'll be yet, but we're also going to have a time frame, something that the White House did not offer last night as they began to come forward with some of the communications that they may provide this committee.
So reclaiming my time, what the chairman is saying is if we vote for this extremely open-ended resolution, then we're just giving carte blanche to the chairman to ask the White House for anything he wants to ask them for with any time frame he wants to without consulting with anybody. And I think that that is even more cause for concern of this committee, because this committee has a long-standing tradition of working together on documents that should be produced. And I'll just say one last thing. I'm going to put these proposed subpoenas, which were received from the majority late last night after the White House had already made their offer. And these subpoenas don't say draft or potential or anything. They simply reflect the very, very broad language in the resolution.
Are you asking unanimous consent to put that part
Yes,
of the record?
I am.
At the same time, I'd like to put, as Mr. Dingle pointed out, these White House letters from myself and Mr. Upton, the two letters as well as the...
I don't have any objection, and I
the
yield to
council.
Mr. Waxman.
It's my understanding that it's always been the tradition of this committee to vote on specific language of a subpoena. That is the full force and effect of the subpoena. Now we're not being asked to vote on the languages of a subpoena, but to authorize the chairman, when he gets around to figure out what he wants to ask for, to go ahead and issue the subpoena. Now, suppose the chairman acts very arbitrarily and says he wants the president's personal BlackBerry. Well, we won't even have a chance to debate that in committee because we've given him that power. This is an unprecedented power to the chairman of the committee in this committee to give this kind of subpoena power. And we're not voting for a subpoena. We're voting for an authorization for the chairman to issue it, and I reject that.
Gentlelady's time has expired, and I think there is no further discussion on the resolution. The vote occurs on the resolution. All those in favor shall signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no.
Mr. Chairman,
the ayes have it.
I
The resolution.
ask for a roll call vote.
Request for a roll call vote. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Terry. Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan votes aye. Mr. Murphy. Mr. Murphy votes aye. Mr. Burgess. Mrs. Blackburn. Mrs. Blackburn votes aye. Mrs. Myrick. Mrs. Myrick votes aye. Mr. Bilbray. Mr. Gingrey. Mr. Gingrey votes aye. Mr. Scalise. Mr. Scalise votes aye. Mr. Gardner. Mr. Gardner votes aye. Mr. Griffith. Mr. Griffith votes aye. Mr. Barton. Mr. Barton votes aye. Mr. Upton. Mr. Upton votes aye. Ms. DeGette.
No.
Ms. DeGette votes no. Ms. Schakowsky.
No.
Ms. Schakowsky votes no. Mr. Ross. No. Mr. Ross votes no. Ms. Castor. Ms. Castor votes no. Mr. Markey. No. Mr. Markey votes no. Mr. Green. No. Mr. Green votes no. Ms. Christensen. No. Ms. Christensen votes no. Mr. Dingle. No. Mr. Dingle votes no. Mr. Waxman.
No.
Mr. Waxman votes no. Chairman Stearns.
Votes aye.
Chairman Stearns votes aye.
Anyone wish? Mr. Terry.
Mr. Terry votes aye.
Dr. Burgess?
Mr. Burgess votes aye.
Mr. Bilbray?
Mr. Bilbray votes aye.
Anyone else wish to vote who has not voted?
Mr. Chairman, on that vote, there were 14 yeas, 9 nays.
With that, the resolution is agreed to. The quorum being present, the business meeting of the subcommittee is hereby adjourned.